Okay, since I did the video on swedging tubing, I thought I'd do one on bending tubing. I have technically four types of benders that I typically use. And I'm just going to go through all four different methods. First method is, honestly, I think everyone's done it. If you're not making a very severe bend, it is just literally to bend the tubing with your hands. This is thin wall copper, so this stuff moves pretty easy. It's soft copper. If you have hard copper, you'd need to heat it up and let it cool with a torch before you did this. If it's too hard, it won't bend really at all. And the thing with this is you can't bend it too tight because you'll eventually get to where it starts to crush down and collapse, which is no bueno. Now, up from that is using a spring tool, spring bender. These are really cheap. They're sized for different types of tubing. This one's 1/4 inch, and it just slides over top of the copper and then allows you to bend and manipulate the copper in a tighter bend than you'd be able to do without, and the spring supports the tubing and keeps it from crushing. Now, the downside to this is, first of all, you got to have an end that you can thread it on, and at a certain point, if you get it too tight, you have a hard time getting the spring back off of it. But you can do a lot of really weird and complex shapes with that. Next one would be a set of these. These are great if you're doing 90s. There is a version that'll do a full 180. I don't have that version. It's just a compound bender, fits 3 sizes of tubing. What you do is you put the tubing on it in the right channel. See, it's got different channels for different sizes of tubing. Put it in there, lock it down, and then this supports the end of the tubing, and you can just bend it. And the die in here keeps the tubing from crushing and lets you make some pretty nice tight bends that stay nice and curved. Now, you can actually continue that bend on this if you put the tubing bender on the other side and just keep going at it. And you can make some pretty good complex weird bends with that. The 180 one lets you go farther without having to readjust. Downside is it's kind of big and bulky. If you're inside of an appliance, it's going to be hard getting this on the tubing you're working on. But if you're bending tubing outside of the appliance that you're then going to braze into it, it's great. And then the third one that I have, these are kind of weird. These I got to try out, and these are actually brake line pliers for steel 1/4 inch brake line. But they work pretty good on copper. I got these because I thought they might work better in tight spaces, and in general I don't use them all that much, but when I do, they work pretty good. They have some limitations. They won't make as nice a curve as this guy will, but they do pretty good. And again, they have an advantage of being able to be used inside of an appliance in a smaller space. Now, with these, what you actually do is you grab the tubing, and also notice that the tubing kind of runs differently along the handle, so if you've got space where the tubing is, it's easier to fit the handle in here. But you grip the tubing with it, and then you just bend it against the die. And it works better if you take it in little chunks. But you can make some pretty neat bends with this without crushing anything down. I will say at the time when I got these were kind of pricey, which was a bummer, but they've held up really well. And in certain situations, they're extremely handy to have. You do have to get the size for the one you're working on. They come in, I've seen them in 1/4 inch, and then I've seen them in 3/16, which I think are the common brake line sizes. I don't know if they make a bigger one. Other than that, there's like a hydraulic bender, and then there's a couple others. Well, the hydraulic bender is really the big one. And mostly those are for much bigger tubing than you're likely to run into in a residential fridge. But those are the types of benders I typically use. Yeah, let me know what you think.